Alright, this is the beginning of an Obsidian two-tone brass ring. Okay, to start, I got my calipers out and I measured exactly how much of the brass I'd be needing. I ended up going to 10.09. It really wasn't that big of a deal. I just needed some decent amount to work with. So then I proceeded to clamping it in and I hacked off the piece I needed. Came off relatively straight, but it didn't matter that much. I was going to face it up on the lathe anyway. So then I took the piece over to my mini lathe and I entered it into the 3-jaw chuck. I just really made sure I clamped it down nice and tight. It's never fun when those things go flying. Alright, so you'll see me have this little red and clear bottle. Inside there is 50% alcohol, just medical grade. It's amazing because it evaporates if it lands on your tool, so it doesn't end up in any rust stains or issues with your tool. You'll see me applying it on a lot of the stuff I do. It's just to keep the metals nice and cool. So here I take the drill bit and I bore out the center of the brass. Brass is amazing because it's such a soft metal. It's amazing to work with. Next I pull my bore bar in and I keep on working at hollowing it out. Alright, so the overall size that this ring needs to sit at with a liner in it is size 13. So relatively big size, but as I'm boring it out, you also have to keep in mind that we will be putting a spalted maple liner on the inside, which takes up space. So you have to make it bigger to start with, that way the liner fits in nicely. So then I take the ring off the lathe and I insert it onto my ring manual. You'll see it doesn't even have a size, but if you look at the distance we have there, it's enough for us to fit a liner in there nice and smoothly. So then I proceed to taking the brass over and I just face it up on the belt sander, sanding down all the edges, making sure they're all flat, properly aligned, and appeasing to the eye, along with sizing it down. I believe it was at 10 millimeters when we first cut it, so I wanted it somewhere around 7. Here you go. At this point, I refilled that little bottle I had for cooling down the metal. My fingers were kind of burning, and it's just 50% alcohol, and it's amazing. It really cools it off, does not damage your tool. That's why I highly recommend it. Alrighty, so I pulled my calipers out again to get a measurement. I was aiming between 7.3 and 7.5 millimeters, which honestly the points is just to give me a rough estimation of kind of what I'm in between. And you see I hit it perfectly with this ring. I accidentally slipped and bumped it up a big time there, but for the most part it worked out well. So next I take the brass onto my disc sander and I give it that Obsidian finish it has. So I adjust the tray to all different angles and I start grinding down the face of it so that you really have that really jagged, rough Obsidian look. Alright, so here you have it. After hitting it at multiple different angles, we finally have the finished product, which is very flashy and it's honestly amazing. So next I hit it with a torch. The goal here is to get it red hot. It didn't honestly take too long. Once it gets red hot, I'm going to quench it. Once quenched, the oil will stick into the groove lines from the belt sander, giving it that dark face. Alright, so I believe in total you only see me quench it and dip it twice in this video, but to get the look I was going for, it was actually 10 quenches altogether, and it really took some time to get that deep dark look. So this very last time I actually just quenched it in water. After dipping it in the oil, it has a lot of oil on it, so you burn it off, and just to cool it off I just dipped it in some water. And as it comes out you can really see it has that overall look that we were really going for. There you go, look at that. It really turned out nice, and you have some darker areas, lighter areas. You have a little bit of red in there from where the heat hit it. It turned out so good. So next you take sandpaper. I took 220 grit. And that's kind of what you need because it's not enough to scratch it up too bad, but it buffs it. And you work your way around the ring, only sanding the top of the facets. That gives you a really shiny overall look to the ring. But it leaves the grooves nice and dark still. Alright, so you can kind of see it before. The top of it's already pretty shiny. So next what I do is I hit it with the buffing wheel. This works out really good. Once again, it buffs the facets, buffs all the edges, gets those really shiny, while simultaneously the compound sticks to some of the grooves, which makes it perfect. So next you'll see me, I taped up my ring mandrel here. The issue was the ring was size 13 and I don't have a ring mandrel for that, so I kind of just made a makeshift one. Now you'll see me hitting it with some paper towel. The only reason of that is I'm just taking off any dirt or grime. Next I took another paper towel that had some sealant in it and I sealed it up. That way it'll keep its color and its look. Alright, now I took some spalted maple that I stabilized, and I cut off a really good section of it that had some really deep details. And I was really happy with the piece I chose because in the overall product it came through really clear. You can see the spalting happening there. Keep in mind that what you see there is not what the finished product will look like. It's a little roughed up now. Alright, so I took it on the belt sander, and the goal was just kind of to round it off so it fit into the jaws of my 3-jaw chuck. There you go. So we finally was able to sand it down, and it's so close to being able to fit on the ring. Next, I have to actually bore out the center of it so it fits on my 3-ring mandrel. Luckily, even though it's stabilized and very hard, you don't actually have to drill out the center of it. I find the bore bar does that all itself. Alright, so I fit the blank onto my ring mandrel, and now I proceed to mounting it onto my lathe and starting to trim it down. You gotta be really careful in this step because you're really trying to get the snuggest fit possible between the ring and the wood, and even the smallest pass is enough to make gaps in the wood in the ring. So you'll see I'm just doing really small passes over, taking off such a little amount of wood, trying to get as close to a perfect fit. And here we have it. So what's nice about the lathe, it keeps your measurement, so I could go right across with the rest of the wood and have it all the same size. You'll see I popped the brass right onto the wood, fits like a glove. I took a little bit of crazy glue. It works really well for this application. I put it on the blank, and next you'll see I popped on the brass ring. Alright, then I bring the crazy glue back and I start gluing around all the edges of the brass where the brass hits the wood. That kind of guarantees that once it dries, there's going to be no gaps, nothing noticeable to the eye. Next, I take it back to my good old belt sander and I trim down the rest of the wood around the brass. I usually go until I just start nicking the brass just a little bit. You'll see right there. So the brass is nice and shiny and the wood is completely flush. Give it a quick rub down with a paper towel to kind of bring out the color in it and get rid of any dust lingering on the piece. Next, you'll see I put some electrical tape over the face of the ring. This is just to protect it as I put it back on my chuck. The chuck jaws are metal, so it's quite abrasive on the material, and it's good to add a little bit of a protective coating to the ring. Alright, so now comes the overall final sizing of the ring. I get the bore bar back in there and I start boring out the middle until it is perfectly flush, until it looks as close to size 13 as I can get. But you also have to keep in mind that we will be doing a lot of hand sanding on it, so you want to leave a little bit of room to accommodate the sanding in the final polish. There you go. I believe that's a size 12. So I just 12 and a half. So I just have a little bit more to do. And that's why I decided to take it up with by hand. All right. So I'm just using 220 grit here. It's not wet dry sandpaper. I find that just dry sandpaper actually is much finer 220 grit than that black piece of sandpaper that you see me holding there. That's actually 1000 grit, and that's what I used to finish the piece off, and it gave it a really nice look. Next, you'll see I put it back in there, and just getting the final sizing, I was just using the 1000 because I don't want to shave off too much. You'll see I have this paper towel here, and I put a little bit of my overall finisher, my urethane, on there to give it the final look. And honestly, I don't think this ring could have turned out any nicer. I made a couple mistakes along the way that you wouldn't have seen in the video, a couple small funny things, and I had to go back and redo it, but for the most part, this ring was an absolute blast to make, and the overall outcome, I wouldn't wish it any different. Alright, and here are just a couple of the best pictures I have of it. Please remember, like and subscribe.